Roll call for day 21, Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Here. Barlow? Present. Beitman? Boner? Here. Bouchard? Here. Brennan? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Dockstetter? Here. Ellis? French? Here. Murphy? Here. Garou? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? Here. Ide? Here. Jones? Here. Kinski? Here. Kolb? Present. Landon? Here. Larson? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Pappas? Here. Rothfuss? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Steinmetz? Here. President Driscoll?
Here.
Mr. President, 31 present.
Thank you. Prayer by Reverend Mark Moss, King of Glory Lutheran Church, Cheyenne.
Thank you. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Almighty and gracious Father in heaven, as your word encourages us, saying, as for you, brothers and sisters, never grow weary of doing good. May those here in this chamber be granted resolve for the long days, stamina in times of weariness, that they not grow tired of doing good. We pray you keep their minds sharp, their character strong, as they discuss and debate the affairs of the state. Grant them calmness, clarity, and charity towards each other as they place the needs of others before their own. May your spirit be with that in that guidance that would be sought from you, who brings forth truth, knowledge, and insight. This we pray through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Sir Beitman, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Catch this, guys. We actually have a doctor today. We have Matthew Mitchell, MD. Come on up, Matthew. He is an orthopod from Casper, so we don't every day say break a leg, but today's the day if you're going to do it. Welcome. So, and we're going to wander a little on today in Wyoming history. I'm going to go off the script just a little. The script is 2 Wyoming girls, school escapees possessing an axe and a rifle are apprehended in Johnson County in 1957. So, you know, this deal not needing firearms is not new. Also on this day was when in 1893, when we came up with the state seal, and it is not the one that you see now, as they actually had one and the legislature had brought up, and a legislator quietly brought one of his own and slipped it into the deal they voted on. They had to undo it all. It was kind of interesting. 1893. So original approved design was substituted by the legislator, carried the seal design to Governor Barber for his own, which had not won approval. That design featured a woman bereft of clothing in the design. When the governor learned of the switch, he commissioned a drawing of the correct seal, but by the time the matter became such controversy, it was kept secret and was not used. Pretty interesting, the games that get played. We're still playing them today. And the other one is a legislator out of my district that ended up being a very famous person, which was Keith Thompson, which is who the Thyra Thompson office building was his wife, and Thompsons are an old Newcastle family and old family friends of ours, and pretty proud of the Thompson family. They're still pretty well represented down here in Cheyenne. They're not in Newcastle anymore, but great family. Quote of the day: do not follow where the path may lead, go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. Harold McAldernon. This is last day for third reading on House of Origin, so if they don't come out, the party's over. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, February 7, 2023, message number 260. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading in an amended form by the votes indicated. House Bill number 183, pari-mutuel and gaming activities amendments. Ayes 37, noes 25. Message number 261, February 7, 2023. House Bill number 171, notice of state land leases and local opportunities. Ayes 36, noes 26. Message number 262, February 7, 2023. House Bill number 175, excused absence, state fair events. Ayes 45, noes 17. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you. Reports from standing committees.
February 7, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 16 engrossed, State Land Leasing Improvements, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Hicks, Ide, Kolb, and Steinmetz. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman. February 8, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 14, Civil Case Filing Fees Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Nethercott. No, Senator Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 8, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 4, to whom is referred House Bill 26, School Facilities Appropriations. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Rothfuss, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman. February 8, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 70, Definition of Home-Based Educational Program. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Scott, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Scott, Chairman. February 8, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 52 engrossed, Revisers Bill. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 8, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 9 engrossed, Juvenile Courts, Concurrent Jurisdiction Clarification. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman. February 7, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 20 engrossed, Land Exchanges Notice. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Hicks, Ide, Kolb, and Steinmetz. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Bills on second reading. House Bill 10, having been read, House Bill 10.
House Bill 10, County Officers, Bond Amounts and Surety Requirement.
House Bill 10, having been read 2 second times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 12.
House Bill 12, Presumptive Child Support Amounts Updated Tables.
House Bill 12, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 24, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 24 engrossed, State Investments, Compensation and Relocation Amendments.
House Bill 24, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 28, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 28 engrossed, Community College Capital Construction.
House Bill 28, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 29, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 29, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours.
House Bill 29, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 35, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 35, Daycare Certification Requirement and Amendments.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had some discussion on this yesterday, and I visited with those who are bringing up concerns, put them in contact with the Department of Family Services there, or the department overseeing this, excuse me for saying that. And then I bring attention that we put sideboards on with the amendment that the good chairman added.
in committee, and I feel like that addresses the concerns that were there. Already have it there, and ask for your support.
Thank you. House Bill 35 have been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 39, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 39, verifying the veteran designation on a Wyoming driver's license.
House Bill 39 having been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 41, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 41, engrossed, lightweight trailers, permanent registration.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in.
House Bill 41, second reading amendments number 1 to engrossed copy, page 2, line 19, delete.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 of House Bill 41 and ask for your favorable vote on this. So if I emailed each one of you guys examples of trailers and their licensing costs, that should be in your email right now. And so what this amendment would do, if you look on page 2, lines 20, well, it'd be 19. There is an option on this for a one-time upfront fee of $500 for a permanent license on these trailers. On committee, when we asked where did this amendment, part of the bill come from, and where did the $500 come from, nobody could answer really that question. It was the one-time upfront fee was something that the House added, but nobody knew exactly where this $500 fee came from. That couldn't be answered. So I asked for a little bit more information, which part of that is emailed to you. And then just a couple of the counties said that on the low end, theirs would be like $50 to $49 would be kind of the overall cost for trailers. On the high end, one of the counties in the middle-ish of the state was like $423 on the high end. One was $272, but on both of those, their average one was $147 and $126. So feeling that $500 might be a little bit high on that one-time fee, I would just ask that we would consider amending this to a $200 fee. That fee is also mentioned on page 3, lines 17, and so it would just amend that so that it's all clear. And I stand for any questions.
The questions. Question being called. We are on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 41. Involves money. This will be a roll call vote.
Second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 41, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan?
Aye.
Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Landon?
Excused.
Excused. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Amendment number 1 to House Bill 41, 30 aye, 1 excused.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 41 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, if you look up in the gallery and see some really bright and happy faces, those are the students of Pioneer Park. It's the 3rd grade class, and they're with their teacher, Miss Amon. So let's give them a welcome to the Wyoming Senate.
Thank you. We're back on the bill. House Bill 41, having been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 45, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 45, Peace Officer Retirement and Rehiring.
House Bill 45 had been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 47, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 47, Election Equipment Federal Certification.
House Bill 47 hadn't been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 50, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 50, Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding.
House Bill 50 having been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 51, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 51, Legislator Constituent Service Allowance.
House Bill 51 having been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 69, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 69, Engrossed Coal-Fired Facility Closures Litigation Funding Amendments.
House Bill 69 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a 3rd time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. House Bill 82, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 82, Defendant Mental Illness Examination Amendments.
House Bill 82 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 97, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 97, Engrossed Chancery Court Jurisdiction Amendments.
House Bill 97 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 104, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 104, Engrossed Hunting of Predatory Animals Amendments.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 104, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 3, line 2, delete.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 104 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, as you'll know, yesterday we're adding some new language in current statute, giving the Game and Fish Department ability to regulate the use of lighting devices, including thermal and infrared, on public, and we added in state lands yesterday. Mr. Chairman, the new language, if you look on, and that's new, and then subject to limitations established by the commission, that was language was brought in with the standing committee amendment. Mr. Chairman, actually, when the bill came to this body, in line 2, it has specified by rule of the commission. So really, what the amendment proposes is striking that specified rule of the commission, because that actually has implications to private lands. So I have no trouble with the commission having authority over public lands and state lands, but current law gives private landowners, you can see it on page 3, lines 4 through 8, they do not have authority of us, and I don't think it's appropriate to give them authority in the context of this bill. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd let stand for any questions. Ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Question being called. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mine is just a technical question. If we're worried about that, the expansion would be to thermal or infrared. So on line 1, it should say lighting device including thermal or infrared imaging, period. Because then it says, or other lighting imaging specified by rule of the commission. So I'm just wondering if we needed to delete a little bit more, the entire line of 2 and maybe the word or on line 1.
Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, maybe that can be subsequently, or Mr. President, subsequently we can take a look at that. I think that the distribution of the specified by rule through the 2 existing components of statute are what I'm trying to get rid of. As far as whether the including thermal, et cetera, that language, I think that's just a further explanation of what a lighting device is. It's just adding context to what that is. So certainly if the good senator thinks that's appropriate at some point, but what I want to do is not give the more authority to the commission on private lands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question being called. We are on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 104. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 104 is passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. House Bill 104 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 111, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 111 engrossed, endangering children, fentanyl.
House Bill 111 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 112, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 112 engrossed, theft penalty for 5th or subsequent offense.
House Bill 112 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Do we have the journal report read in?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 7, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
You've heard the report. Are there any objections? Being none, the report is adopted. Senator Larson, that's your job. When I miss that, you're supposed to tell me. Get on the job. Senator Cooper.
Privilege of the floor, please.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, and members of the Senate, I'd like to introduce grade 6 to 9 of our Basin Mennonite community from Basin, Wyoming, and their teacher, Ms. Cohen. We're really proud of our growing Mennonite community. They're great neighbors, great friends, and I'd sure like to welcome them to the Senate today.
Hear, hear.
Would you stand up for us, please?
Bills on 3rd reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Mr. President, microphone, please.
Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. President, we do have a consent list. Mr. President, I move Senate File 133, Student Eligibility in Interscholastic Sports. Senate File 138, Unemployment Insurance Coverage, Period and Reporting. Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition. Senate File 147, Government Contracts, Labor Organizations. Senate File 148, Preemption of Local Firearms Regulation. Senate File 151, Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act. Senate File 153, Election Security. And Senate File 168, Alternative Teaching Certificate.
Anyone like any of these removed from the consent list? Senator Poppins.
Yes, Mr. President, could I have Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition removed?
So ordered. Anyone else? Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 133, Student Eligibility in Interscholastic Sports. Senate File 138, Unemployment Insurance Coverage, Period and Reporting. Senate File 147, Government Contracts, Labor Organization. Senate File 148, Preemption of Local Firearms Regulation. Senate File 151, Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act. Senate File 153, Election Security. Senate File 168, Alternative Teaching Certificate. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson?
Aye.
Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French. Murphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. Ide. Jones. Kinsky. Kolb. Landon. Larson. McEwen. Nethercott. Pappas.
Aye.
Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. And President Driscoll.
Aye.
On the consent list, 31 aye. Senate File 133, are there any changes? Case, I to know. Case, I to know. Rothfuss? I to know. I to know.
Peru, I don't know.
Guru, I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 133, 28 aye, 3 no. Senate File 138, are there any changes? Rothfuss? I to know. Case? I to know.
Peru, I don't know.
Guru, I to know. Barlow, I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 138, 27 aye, 4 no. Senate File 147, are there any changes? Rothfuss? I to know.
Peru, I don't know.
Guru, I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 147, 29 aye, 2 no. Senate File 148, are there any changes? Rothfuss? I to know.
Should have voted no.
Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 148, 30 aye, 1 no. Senate File 151, are there any changes?
Driscoll, I don't know.
Driscoll, I to know.
Peru, I don't know.
Guru, I to know. Cooper, I to know. Jones, I to know. Baldwin, I to know. Murphy, I to know. Kolb, I to know. Barlow, I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 151, 23 aye, 8 no. Senate File 153, are there any changes? Rothfuss? I to know.
Peru, I don't know.
Guru, I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 153, 29 aye, 2 no. And Senate File 168, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 168, 31 aye.
Having received the affirmative vote of the Senate, Senate File 133, Student Eligibility and Interscholastic Sports, Senate File 138, Unemployment Insurance Coverage Period and Reporting, Senate File 147, Government Contracts, Labor Organization. Senate File 148, Preemption of Local Firearms Regulation. Senate File 151, Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act. Senate File 153, Election Security. And Senate File 168, Alternative Teaching Certificate, have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading. Senate File 50, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 50, Charter School Amendments, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to charter schools.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, we did lay this back and prepared amendments to conform it to the larger charter school bill we'd already passed. But, Mr. President, we've thought about it pretty hard and decided that better strategy is just go with what we've already passed. So I'm going to, knowing it disposes of the bill, I'm going to ask that Senate File 50 be laid back.
Without objection, so ordered. Senate File 107, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 107, Acquisition, Exchange, and Sale of Trust Lands, sponsored by Senator Hicks, an act relating to state lands.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I had this removed from consent list because the good minority floor leader had asked a question in the first reading, and you have a handout on your desk now, and it shows a map of the state of Wyoming with a bunch of little bitty tiny blue dots all over it. And so the Office of State Lands and Investment was able to generate this data through their GIS. The question was, well, how many parcels of 80 acres or less are there in the state of Wyoming? And it's substantial, Mr. President. So you'll see on the side, there's 2,149 acres of state school trust lands that are 80 acres or smaller scattered. You can see the counties, and it comes up to a total of just a little over 109,000 acres. So the idea with the bill here, Mr. President, is we would start to, you know, on a voluntary basis, but to liquidate those and accumulate those. And when we get to that point that we have enough of those sold under the policies that we've adopted with this legislation and the Office of State Lands and Investment, the State Land Board then would go out there and acquire a block that makes it easier to manage and has a higher return on the investment. So, but that's all this was for, Mr. President, was just to get those numbers for the minority floor leader to show. It's extensive.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks to the majority floor leader for providing this. This is very useful information. Appreciate it. On for the bill.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question on and for the bill, by the way. I think it's very important. Quick question for the maker. Are there protections built in here for the leaseholders? Will they have privileges, first right of privilege or first right of refusal, if you will? And second, is there, why did we stick at 80 acres? There's a lot of little 120s or things like that that would probably work well too. But primarily the protections for the leaseholders.
So, Mr. President, the answer is yes. The normal process would still reside with most of these are going to be nominated by those landowners that currently have those leases. And so those current protections stay in place. Mr. Chairman, what we wanted to do was 80 is we didn't want to put this out there and make it so big that it either created a potential financial hardship on a landowner having to, or being pressured or wanting to put these up for nominating. And then the other side is just to try to get this program up and running and try to start this process. And it just seemed like the first step is to start with small incremental amounts instead of going out there, you know, again, if we go back to the early 90s when we were selling section after section after section, that was a grave concern to the public as a whole. These lands are a long-term asset to the state of Wyoming. So we felt this was a modest approach to start that process. I hope that answers my colleague's question.
Thank you. Senate File 10, haven't been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall Senate File 107, acquisition, exchange, and sale of trust lands, pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 107. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Scott, no. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 107, 30 aye, 1 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate, Senate File 107, acquisition, exchange, and sale of trust lands, has passed the Senate. Senate File 142, third reading in the Senate file. Granted, there's another copy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good senators, you have another portion of Mrs. Amon's third grade class from Pioneer Park Elementary School. A warm Senate welcome to the Pioneer Park brilliant third grade students here in Cheyenne.
Here, here. Senate File 142, third reading in the Senate file.
Senate File 142, Carbon Capture and Sequestration, sponsored by Senator Scott, an act relating to public utilities.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 142, third reading amendment number 1, page 41, line 19, after.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 142. Mr. President, this is brought to us by our good department that does environmental analysis and regulation in the state of Wyoming. It's a bit of cleanup, and it goes to pages 42 of the bill, and it deals with a couple of different areas where there's sort of joint jurisdiction between the Department of Environmental Quality and the Public Service Commission. And so what it does is it straightens those things out and makes it that in the one case that's environmental regulations at the Department of Environmental Quality. In the second case, it's about costs, and that's the Public Service Commission. And then it provides that they jointly have a reporting requirement. So I could read it in, but I think it's friendly to the author, and it's just more of the work to make this bill better. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, this is a very friendly amendment. I think it does illustrate the degree to which agencies are taking this seriously, and we need to have this looked to make sure we're getting the reclamation properly handled so we can continue to use the plant, which is an important coal-fired plant. So, Mr. President, it's a friendly amendment on and for the amendment.
Thank you. Question being called. We're on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 142. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 142 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall Senate File 142, caption Carbon Capture and Sequestration, pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 142. Anderson? No. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Whitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 142. 25 aye, 6 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 142, Carbon Capture and Sequestration, has passed the Senate. Senate File 144, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition, sponsored by Senator Bouchard, an act relating to public health and safety.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I got to looking at this bill, I have one question that I'd like to pass by the bringer of the bill, and that concerns me a lot, and it's with not so much in Article 10. If you go to page 2 and look at Article 9, that we're talking about coverage for gender-related procedures, and so this health insurance coverage, it basically says that any nonprofit corporation or individual or group service contract issued on or by a health maintenance organization or delivered on or after July 1st, 2023 shall include coverage for gender transitioning or gender reassignment procedures, provided that so and so and so and so. So if these folks cannot, or the insurance companies cannot include that after July 1 in their policies, I've been told that it's a federal mandate that they do. So if that's the case, our insurance companies we're pitting against a law that we're creating here and a federal mandate that they have to include that in. So does that mean then they will not be able to offer policies to our folks in Wyoming? That has huge consequences to me, irregardless of the premise of the bill. If we are excluding the ability for them to provide insurance policies because they have to meet a federal law, that concerns me. So just a little clarity, hopefully. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, this went through committee, and insurance companies were sitting in the audience, and they did not testify in any opposition to this bill. So that's all I can answer on that.
Seen no further questions. Question being called. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition, pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 144, third reading roll call. Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Cooper? No to aye. Landon, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 144, 26 aye, 5 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children, Gender Change Prohibition, has passed the Senate. Senate File 146, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 146, State-Funded Capital Construction, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to state-funded capital construction.
There is amendments. Could we have the amendment read in?
Senate File 146, third reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 3, after.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 146. Members of the body, this would just insert a footnote into the capital construction bill. Let me tell you what this came to me actually last summer from a couple of the commissioners on the Transportation Commission, and they were a little bit alarmed as they had awarded a contract, a fairly large one for some highway construction. And then, as we all know, anybody involved in the construction business, there's always change orders. Circumstances change, you run into geology or something, materials are not available, so you have to switch materials. It's not unusual to do change orders, Mr. President, but in this particular case, there was a regional engineer on a project that authorized a $5 million change order on a project, which is oftentimes much larger than what entire contracts are. And so this did not go back to the commission for any approval or review or recommendation. So I had consulted, they thought that $500,000 was a reasonable amount to allow discretion for those change orders. Anything above and beyond that, Mr. President, it would require commission approval. They've assured me that they could do that in a relatively fast fashion. Mr. Chairman, that's what the amendment does. But Mr. Chairman, when I had asked to have this drafted up by LSO, they said, originally I looked at a budget amendment and they said historically if these kind of things happen with construction, they would go in, be more appropriate to go into the capital construction bill. Subsequent to that, Mr. Chairman, I have also received notification from LSO that this may go beyond the constitutional limits of modifying the title of the bill, Mr. Chairman, and I think just in an abundance of caution, I'm going to remove this, withdraw this amendment at this point in time, but I did want to use it as an opportunity just to let folks know that this practice had gone on as just an FYI. So, Mr. President, I at this point in time would like to remove first reading amendment number 1, or third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 146.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, privilege of the floor.
Granted.
Mr. President, thank you. And I appreciate the majority floor leader bringing this topic at least to the chamber so that people are aware of what we did run into last interim. As your transportation chairman, I spent some time on the telephone with commissioners and with the director of the Department of Transportation. I've been assured that they're going to look at this and that they're going to work on it. There is some sense in the fact that putting this in rule, that certainly makes sense. If they can't get there, I know that those who remain on the Transportation Committee will certainly be looking at it, and you might see this in the future, but my hope is that that'll be resolved. The issue out there, Mr. President, not to bog us down for long, but our district engineers have a little bit of purview because you've got construction, major construction sites that you don't want to have to dismantle, set down, and await decisions when you're out there on a project. And so there's a lot of good to the ability that we give our district engineers to go ahead and get that work done. Just establishing that level, the majority floor leader is right. We've got to do that, and I think that will come through rule. I think they're going to work on it. If they don't, I know you'll see it again. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Cole.
Privilege of the floor.
Granted.
I sit as your Senate liaison to the Transportation Commission and witnessed this whole issue unfolding. And I can tell you, according to their own rules published on their website, it would seem to the general public that they're going against their own rules. And I look forward to a resolution because a $5 million change order is well beyond the pale. And I believe they have the ability to expedite that question with the commission and have it resolved in that manner. I just wanted to throw that out there as information. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next amendment, please. That was withdrawn. Senator Hicks. Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I'd move third reading amendment number 2 to
No,
Senate.
we have it read in, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President.
Senate File 146, third reading amendment number 2, Section 27, capital construction, delete.
Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146, and I bring back to you, this deals with the Riverton State Office Building. And Mr. Chairman, it would have deleted the action of the last, but further reduced this appropriation by $21.5 million. So it would effectively leave $12.5 million in that count. And Mr. Chairman, I heard the floor yesterday. I listened to the discussion and, where did the 12.5? I listened to my chairman of the construction department who's got a lot of experience in this, and just on his back of the napkin calculations, if we just built an office today in Riverton to house the existing state employees with the existing amount of square footage that we have up there, at today's price at $500 a square foot, that would roughly be about $12.5 million, Mr. President. And so this is just it's a significant reduction, down $21.5 million. It would provide that appropriation for that account if we just wanted to move forward at some time in the next couple of years based on the outcome of what the task force determines, but it just would provide that level of funding for the current number of state employees that are currently housed in Riverton that we have contracts with. So on and for the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you. We are voting on third reading amendment number 2. Excuse me, Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, on and against the amendment. Yesterday, we defeated this $34 million because it was going to take some time to get the study done. We put $50,000 in for the study. That will probably take 4 to 5 years. It took 5 years in Casper for that study before we asked for any money. So I think we're preemptive on this with any money. So this amendment puts 12.5 million, 13 million back in. I'm against this amendment. Thank you.
Sir Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment. The good Vice President in the last few days has talked to us a lot about the process, the way these things are approved and the way we bring these type of buildings forward. He's asked us to trust the process, and now we're going to bypass the process again. In my opinion, we're going to go one way or the other. So let's trust the process. We've got the money in there for the study. Let's stay with where we're at. Thank you, sir.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment, I too heard closely the voices yesterday. I will simply remind the body that we have a task force that will be giving recommendations. If the task force decides that this is not the way to go, then the finance goes back to the state. The other issue that I heard yesterday was that we were growing government. I can assure you that with this appropriation, it's not growing government. If it was growing government, I wouldn't be voting for it. This is a policy decision of redistributing current assets to greater Wyoming. And I ask for your support. I think this is the way we should go. Appreciate it.
Mayor Scott.
Mr. President, I've got just a question. I'm not at all clear. If we pass this amendment, does that mean the money is going to be spent for an office building, or does it merely set it aside so that it can be spent in the future? If it's setting aside, Mr. President, that's a sensible thing to do so that this proves to be a wise decision. If it will save us money, then we'll have money from the good times set aside to construct it when the time comes. If it means we're going to short circuit the process and decide to build it anyhow, then it's not a good idea. So, Mr. President, I would like to know whether this is just setting money aside or a final appropriation that's going to be spent regardless of what the task force comes up with.
Senator Pappas.
Mr. President, no, this project's not going to be built in this next year. We know that, right? We've got to wait for the task force to do its work. If you've all heard my impassioned plea about if we're going to build something, let's build it now because it's going to cost more later. I agree with that, but we're not building this now. It may, and it probably won't be built during the time of this legislature. It'll be at least 2 years, 3 years down the road, if not 5, like the other building in Casper. So I agree, we may need it. Let's do the study. There's no reason to appropriate this money now in a special budget. It can be appropriated in the next budget if we get the report back before we meet again. And if not, then there's certainly no reason to appropriate it now and hold on to that money for long term. We don't do that on any other projects. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mayor Hicks.
Mr. President, if I can answer some of those questions to my colleague from Natrona County, this does not pre-decide that this is going to be. This is a set aside in case we need this money and the recommendation comes back from the task force. So it's not obligating these monies. It says if that task force recommends that we have seed money to construct a building. Mr. Chairman, to the idea that we don't do this, we do this all the time. I can think of Water Development Account 3 for large dams and reservoirs that we historically save money for future projects. Mr. Chairman, we have what we call the Penitentiary Capital Construction Account that every biennium we appropriate $10 million. But we stick in that account, but we don't have a plan right now to build a penitentiary. We know sometime in the future we're going to have to build a penitentiary. We did this very exact same thing in the budget, Mr. President. We took money from the reversions from the Department of Health and we put them in a demolition account. $24 million is exactly what we did, Mr. Chairman, in the budget. This does exactly the same thing. With regard to my colleague from up in the basin from process, this is the process, Mr. President. You alluded to that the other day. You bring an amendment. In fact, we had this very discussion yesterday regarding a project here in our capital city dealing with a bridge across the highway that there was inserted as a round robin. This is the process, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I would argue this is a better process to actually debate this as to whether we want to do this or not, than have somebody in appropriations just slip it in, and then if you don't catch it on the floor, Mr. Chairman. So this is the process. I think you alluded to that fact. This body decided yesterday that this process is appropriate for this. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that addresses my colleagues' questions on and for the amendment, Mr. President.
He's spoken twice. We're voting on third read amendment number 2 to Senate File 146. It involves money. It'll be a roll call vote.
Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 126. Roll call, Anderson. No. Baldwin? No. Barlow? No. Beitman? Aye. Boner? No. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Amendment number, third reading number 2, 20 aye, 11 no.
By your vote, third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146 has passed the Senate. The reading clerk, read the next amendment in.
Senate File 146, third reading amendment number 3, delete.
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 146, ask for your favorable consideration. We had an amendment in the last, it was second reading, I believe, to divert some money to construction for horse racing tracks. I agree with the idea. I think it's a good idea, but what I'm asking is you to resist this amendment today, and you've got a handout on your desk, and this part of the reason why lies in this handout that was sent by my friend from Laramie County. You can see it here. And it just shows you the historic horse racing total wage handle across the top there going from 2017 to 2022. And then you see what the payouts are to cities and towns, state commissions, breeder awards. And as you recall, and some of the new members, when this came into being, it was sold to us to help the Breeders' Award, which obviously it has, to the tune of $12 million, and also to help live horse racing, which it has done. And I don't have a problem with helping and continuing to help horse racing, but when you looked at the bottom on gross gaming revenue, $88,251,000, that's a big number. And so we, just say that maybe they could probably put a little more skin in this game. And what I would propose is that we take a look at this in the interim and see if we can come up with something. Because right now, the feedback I'm getting is getting feedback from some folks talking about, hey, why are we helping these guys out? They're doing pretty good. 1. 2, actually, it kind of creates a little bit of a winner-loser thing between some of the operators, which concerns me because I don't want to do that. Kind of like a unintended consequence. So I want to make sure we get that right. And 3, there is some question about whether it's actually going to do what we want it to do, and that's build more tracks. And so I want to make sure we get it right. And that's why I bring this today. It's not against the idea. It's just against this way, at this particular time. So more than happy to hear discussion on this, and hope you support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Guru. For the discussion on third reading amendment number 3. Mr. President, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just do a correction and tell you, this doesn't build any new tracks. It does not. purely addresses track safety and stalls. That's what this amendment addressed. And, you know, from my end, I know what they make for money, we can see it, but we're not forcing them to put it back into it. These are public facilities. The tracks that this amendment deals with are owned by our counties. And they can prioritize and spend their money, or the operators can voluntarily put it in. From my end, this is a safety issue. This is about not injuring horses or jockeys or having problems. And so from my end, it is merely a deal to make dang sure that we're not breaking legs on horses, injuring horses, or injuring jockeys, and it gets that back in there. The fact of the matter, this money is, regardless what they make, these are historic horse racing dollars, Mr. Chairman. These are dollars generated from those. We passed that bill. That money was there for a reason. It was there to enhance historic horse racing. That's, or actually not even historic, real horse racing on track. And what we've done is we've diverted part of that money, and we now are putting, last year, $1.1 million back into the general fund. That's good. It's kind of an additional tax. They already pay tax. It's an additional one. Yes, there's a difference between operators. I can tell you I've communicated with all of them. We have a track that's private. They own their track, and when they get ready to sell their track or move it, they own the improvements. How many of you want to invest your money into somebody else's facility and then have someone else show up and operate that facility with your improvements and you didn't get anything out of it? I merely want safety for these races. I desperately love horse racing. That was the only reason I went for anything that resembled gambling to start with. I love it, but I want it to be safe, and I want it to be as good as we can, and I want to build the industry of horse racing, not the industry of gaming. I ask you to resist this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Further discussion, Senator Ellis, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. If you look at that table, I wanted to tell the body where these numbers came from. Back in 2020, the Gaming Commission issued a study, and it had the data for 2017, 18, 19, and half of 20. And so I asked if we, where was this information for 21, 22? And to just explain it a little bit more, the data they provide is the total handle, which is how much they get in wagers. And then you'll see the reductions in the fees and how much is returned to the public. I just can't emphasize enough how much this industry has grown from $24 million to $88 million within that time frame. So what this would do, Mr. Chairman, is, Mr. President, in 2019, that's when we started providing a diversion toward the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. And last year, they contributed $3 million to that account. So what this amendment would do, if we were to leave it in, would be to divert anything above $1.5 million to go directly to the tracks. The concerns I have with this are many. If you go to the back side of your page, you'll see there are 3 operators presently, and I'm not going to use proper names, but there's one in the southwest corner, one in Sweetwater County, and one in Campbell County. 2 of those are public. One of them is private. So for the private individuals, they've expressed concern. They've, instead of relying on having to negotiate a lease with a public entity, with their county commissioners, they have their own track. So all of those things that we talk about when it comes to safety of the track, safety of the stalls, they foot the bill for all of that. Conversely, with the public facilities, what was always contemplated was that this revenue would be able to supplement and improve those facilities. So when they're negotiating these contracts, like all of us do when we sign lease agreements for our businesses, are we going to pay for the electricity? Are we going to pay for major improvements, security systems, alarms that are in leased facilities? Those are things that happen already. These are sophisticated entities, multi-million dollar, big number entities that hire attorneys that can go negotiate with the county, and they can figure out all of these details. But what this amendment does is it gives them a leg up. It gets them to keep a little bit more money in their pocket, let us pay for the improvements in the name of safety. And Mr. Chairman, I just don't think that's right. The other concern along those lines that I have was this was brought as a committee of the whole amendment. So to the extent that we had any public debate or people allowed to show up and testify, they weren't able to do that. So the concerns we've been hearing are in the hallways, not expressed on public record. And they're legitimate. This is a really intense industry with sharp elbows. And so our job, Mr. President, is to make sure that we're providing the fairest and most level playing field for these businesses so that they can compete amongst each other. We should not be offering this kind of assistance at the very least without a significant public hearing. So, Mr. President, this, I appreciate you and your cordiality. We've discussed this in the hallway, but you know, I just really would urge you to vote aye on this. And if we need to take a closer look on how to do it better, let's do it the right way.
Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I understand the reason for the amendment, and I do believe that a couple of our tracks probably are not in as good a shape as the one down in my neck of the woods, the one that's private. And they do a really good job of keeping the tracks safe and putting their money back into it. The biggest question I have really, it's not so much the fairness, because I understand it's public versus private, but I just wondered if there's any way to guarantee that those funds would actually go to track maintenance rather than something else. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss? I had a question to ask. I wasn't going to speak again, but I think a better answer.
Mr. President, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it does. The amendment says that it goes towards track safety and possibly the stalls. So you could have some stalls done with it, which enters into safety as far as the horses goes, in my opinion. But without that, no, it's purely a safety issue. That was the whole reason for this amendment. Isn't for competition between people. It is for track safety. And I above all, do not want to have injured horses or bad track conditions. And these tracks do, folks, on the public facilities, they do other things in them. They do demolition derbies, they do, so it takes work to get those tracks back ready, to have the track conditions right to race. They really work at that. And the same thing's true for the railing that goes around and some of the safety features. Those are specific to horse racing. And they're a big deal. And for me, I want my public facilities to have the best they can. And this isn't using taxpayer money. This is using money generated for that purpose that we have diverted. You know, we've actually, what we've done is added an additional tax to these businesses. And this merely is taking some of their own money and making sure that they're having a safe environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Further discussion? Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I will be a no on this amendment, primarily to honor the memory of the two legislators that were the driving force behind the creation of this historic horse racing. The first was the senator who occupied this seat, who preceded me as the senator from Johnson County, and a representative from Campbell County. Those two were determined that they were going to bring actual horse racing back to Wyoming. I've never liked these gaming bills from the beginning. I've seen the people who make the machines and lease the machines make money. I've seen the people who run the casinos make money. Thank goodness we've got some money going towards the breeder awards. But there are actually too few live horse racing events, which was the whole rationale for this, to bring horse racing back to Wyoming. The reason that the senator who preceded me was so passionate about it, there's a large racetrack out on the West Coast. If you're ever there, you will see a statue erected to the memory of his father, who was regarded as the author of all the horse racing rules for all of the Western states. These folks raised racing horses in Wyoming and shipped them all over the United States. There is still a nascent remnant of that industry, but we need to nurse it into life. And we need to have horse racing in Wyoming. And the way to do that is to make sure that we have decent, good tracks that can hold an audience, so that horse racing is not just oh yeah, it's an afterthought while we're really running machines. It becomes a real thing. I'm not a horse racing fan, but I know the president and many other people in Wyoming are passionate about it. Now that we've got these machines up and running, it seems entirely appropriate in memory of the two drivers behind this concept to put a little bit of money towards actual horse racing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and against this amendment. I'd like to say that Sweetwater County is known for a lot of things, but we were the ones that brought back live horse racing. And it's always been an issue about trying to improve the venue, and it's done in a county. It's a county events complex, not privately owned. To improve the facility improves the entire sport, brings back money, it encourages the horse racing event, and when you make the venue better, more folks participate. And I will say I don't gamble, but I do appreciate people that like to, and it's a great benefit, and we do need to put some money back in again to support this event. Thank you, Mr. President.
Comment. Senator Ellis, your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President, for my second time. I just want to offer that no one is against live horse racing. Got the message, got the memo loud and clear. Wyoming loves Wyoming horse racing. The problem is, and I just heard it, there are too few live horse races. The promise we always heard was that these machines would help improve more and create more live horse racing opportunities in Wyoming. What I see, Mr. President, is these operators have a duty to invest some of that $88 million into those facilities. That's the nexus. That's where that money should be coming from. When you look at what's been happening in this industry in particular, we have more than doubled the games in the last 2 or 3 years. What do you see in my community? You all spend 40 days here in January and February. You see new facilities on big box streets that offer these machines that operate all day. And when I drive by there on a Sunday morning, I see people there. When I drive home on a Saturday night, I see people there. People are pumping money into these mini casinos. I saw them buy a building on a large thoroughfare in my community, in our downtown area. There is money. The question is, where are they investing it? They're investing it in other facilities that provide more machines, that generate more revenue that goes in their pockets. All I'm asking, Mr. President, is instead of focusing on that, they made a commitment to use our facilities, our public facilities. And that's the trade-off they make as business people. They can either use a county facility or they could build their own. So these are business decisions. We're not asking them to do anything extraordinary from what they've been doing already. If they are concerned about the tracks, about the stalls, the Gaming Commission in their rules has very extensive language about the duties they have to provide to ensure that races are conducted safely. If those facilities are that bad, they shouldn't be allowed to offer the race. Hence, the operator would say, how do we get these facilities up to snuff so that we can operate a safe race that meets the compliance needs required in the rules and regulations? That's how that works. These are business decisions. And if they don't want to do business with the county, then they can go build their own track. Nothing prevents these individuals from going out there. So that's what this is about, Mr. President. This is about business decisions. And we shouldn't be micromanaging when we have 3 operators who are very capable and financially competent to be doing that. Our obligation is to make sure that it's fair. And part of that fairness is to make sure that that revenue source that was created to ensure that we were receiving money in the LISRA is sustained. And I just offer, even if you agree, we got to protect live horse racing. I don't disagree with that. This is a bill that should have come through the legislative process. There were no committee hearings on this. The public that we've heard from had no opportunity to testify on it. So even on that point, Mr. President, I would just urge your no vote.
Question being called. We're on third read amendment number 3 to Senate File 146, involves money. Roll call.
Third reading amendment numbers 3 to Senate File 146. Roll call. Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. No. Barlow. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. No. Dockstetter. No. Ellis. Aye. French. No. Furphy. No. Guru. Aye. Hicks. No. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. Aye. Jones? No. No. Kinsky? No. Cole? No. No. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. French, no to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Third reading amendment number 3, 17 aye, 14 no.
By your vote, third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 146 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the Senate File 146, state-funded capital construction, pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 146, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Whitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? Scott, aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 146, 20 aye, 11 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of majority members elected to the Senate, Senate File 146, state-funded capital construction, has passed the Senate. Includes third reading. I'm going to take a quick privilege. Off to my right, folks, is Sheriff Jeff Hodge, who is Crook County Sheriff. Being as I get to be president, I'm bringing my sheriff. This is Law Enforcement Day. I hope you all went and stole a burrito this morning. Great food. But on behalf of Jeff, and we don't have all the others here, but oh, they're above me. I'm not seeing them. So this is our day of our law enforcement. I'd like to see them all stand up. I can't tell you guys how much the good law enforcement in Wyoming means to us. This has been a long winter for you folks. It's been hard on law enforcement. We thank you every day for everything you do, and in particular, Jeff, thanks for what you do in our county. These rural counties are not simple to be sheriffs in. So please join me in welcoming.
Absolutely. On behalf of the Wyoming Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police and the Wyoming Sheriffs Association, we really appreciate the support and the working relationships we have with you guys, and we'd love to continue those relationships in the future. So we appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Thanks again. Senator Lamb.
Mr. President, may I have the privilege of the floor?
You may.
As those guys make their way out of here, I just want to join you in saying giving thanks to everything they do. And I wanted to share with you, Mr. President, last night I was fortunate enough to join that group at a function during which they had a speaker who came up from the state south of us and shared an evening full of information, put about 50 pounds in a 10-pound bag. But it was absolutely fascinating, Mr. President, to look at the 10 years in that state from which time they legalized marijuana. It was a good enough presentation that I'm hoping to bring it to our Joint Judiciary Committee, and I will certainly let everybody know in case they have an opportunity to join us later on in the spring. But Mr. President, it made me pretty proud when they showed a couple of graphs and they showed the usage chart, and it showed a baseline number in Wyoming that was right down at the bottom. Of course, above that was the national average, and above that was the state to the south of us. But I was very, very proud that we've been careful on this front. And what a great learning experience, and wanted to tip my hat to Mr. Oda Coven. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use a name there, but certainly the chiefs and sheriffs. It was a great night of information. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we are without order of business consideration of bills on general file. Mr. Minority Floor Leader, would you like to make a motion?
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on general file.
Second that motion.
Seconded by Majority Floor Leader Hicks. You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senator Grew, come on up. Only fitting that we have your colleague call you up.
Here's my list. Still 181, the first one. The Committee of the Whole, please come to order. The first House bill for our consideration is House Bill 181. Would the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 181, engrossed, online sports wagering amendments, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act related to gaming. It was referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Nethercott. No, Senator Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the Senate file. What is your pleasure? Senator Kinski, you ready to make a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a due pass recommendation on House Bill 181, and here for an explanation of this, I defer to my colleague from Teton County, the Honorable Senator Mike Guru.
Thank you, Senator Kinski. Honorable Senator Guru, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Floor Leader. Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I bring you House Bill 181, online sports wagering amendments. Before I go through this bill, your Appropriations Committee took up the charge of taking a look at gaming regulations around the state. This is a subject that's been passed. The torch has been passed from committee to committee. Wound up with appropriations this summer in the interim. And we came up with a few bills, and this one comes from our commission that takes care of such things, all things gaming. And this is one of those bills. This one is subject to online sports wagering, the sports wagering that you do over computers, telephones, on sporting events and other events that you see advertised worldwide. And what this bill does, and I'll just kind of walk you through it real quick, the biggest takeaways for this for folks is starting on page 2 line 9. This clears up a bit of confusion based on when those online sports wagering groups are advertising. You see the ads that say, well, if you lose your first bet, we'll give you $1,000 worth of free play. Well, there was some confusion about how much you could deduct, the companies deduct that from what they pay us, or what they pay their taxes on. A bit of confusion on what the actual value of those promotional deals are, as far as what the dollar amount they're offering is and what the actual dollar value is. And you see that on line 11 on page 2. So we cleared that up to the actual value to make sure that that was clearly delineated. As we move on, the next big part about this is fingerprinting and background checks for people that are most involved in this industry and that can affect the outcomes. This too is important to be talked about, whether it's the permittee or the licensee of these outfits. And you see that going through page 4 and page 5. Also on page 5 talks about the amounts of money, say page 5, line 10, about amounts of $500,000, in excess of $500,000, go into the general funds. We all know up to $300,000 it goes into school funds. So kind of talks about the payouts there. Another kind of highlight, once again, now as we go to page 6, still talk about license holders, make sure that we get that in there. There was another piece I wanted to bring your attention to. Skipping to page 9, you see the $300,000 for schools. Oh, the last piece, and I'm trying to find out what page it's on, talks about how much money losses they can carry over. It might surprise you to know that while these companies are multi-million-dollar companies, on large sporting events, in just inside one state like Wyoming, sometimes they lose, and sometimes they lose big. And sometimes when they do, they carry over the losses in future months. Well, this bill limits that to 2 months. Their losses can only be carried forward for 2 months. And then after that, they're on their own. Doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while when they lose big, you lose big. So that's kind of the bill. Be more than happy to stay in for your questions. Like I say, on this good little House Bill 181.
Thank you, Senator Grew. We are on House Bill 181. Any questions or discussion? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, why wouldn't it was proposed to be 1 month instead of 2 months worth of losses? I think I've heard of this before. I wasn't in agreement with their ability to do this. They take a risk, they give away the ability to lose to people, and then we pay for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Any additional questions before we go back to the floor sponsor? Questions at this time? Seeing none, back to you, Senator Grew.
Thank you. Great question. And to the good senator, that was kind of before it was just ongoing. And the JAC and I was on the working group on this, just in back and forth, we settled on 2 months. Second reading, amendment come to cut it to 1 month certainly wouldn't break my heart any, but that was just the discussion as it ensued versus just on infinitum. They say, wait a minute, hey, back down to a couple of months. And that was just the tenor of it. So it wasn't anything divine. It was a wag.
Thank you, Senator Grew. For the discussion, we're on House Bill 181, online sports wagering amendments. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Kinski's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation on House Bill 181, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 181 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 18. Will the reading clerk please read the House bill?
House Bill 18, Missing Person Alert Systems, sponsored by the Tribal Relations Committee, an act relating to missing person alert systems, was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman.
And there is an amendment. Let's see. You've heard the reading of the House bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so with a due pass recommendation on House Bill 18, Missing Person Alert System. For an explanation of this bill, I'd ask that you yield to the good chairman of the Tribal Relations Committee.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will explain the bill and then I will move and have the Committee of the Whole amendment read in. Colleagues, years ago, to refresh your memory, the legislature had been working diligently on understanding and trying to address the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people. In 2022, our work culminated with the passage of legislation, and one of the areas that we focused on were the fact that although Wyoming had alert systems in place to recover children, and you should all be familiar with how those work, you either get a text, see something on the television to notify you that a child has gone missing and is endangered. We realized that we didn't have that formalized in our statutes. As we discovered, the Department of Homeland Security in Wyoming holds the contract with our federal agency partners, and the actual program is administered by the Wyoming Highway Patrol. These alerts are incredibly important to recover children when they are abducted. Through the course of our work, we also learned about how that worked on our reservation. And at the time, there was some confusion that somehow Wyoming's Amber Alert System, alert system didn't work on the reservation. We realized that it was being operated, but really on the basis of a handshake between our agencies and the tribal agencies. So what our bill did, Mr. Chairman, is it codified the practice, acknowledging that Homeland Security holds the project, or holds the contract, that the Highway Patrol actually administers it, and that our tribes, if they don't operate their own, that Wyoming would ensure their coverage. Federal law allows Indian tribes, though, to operate their own alert systems, and so we do have language in there, in existing statute that would recognize if our tribes wanted to adopt their own alert systems, that we would treat them as we would any other state and cooperate with them. So in recent years, this system has been very effective, but we've become aware of other systems that can help provide relief and hopefully recover people that are going missing. The alert systems we have in place right now are really focused on children, but we're hearing more and more about what happens when adults and people that are endangered to themselves are going missing. So what this bill would do, Mr. Chairman, would authorize and direct the Department of Homeland Security and the Wyoming Highway Patrol to bring online additional alert systems. And we heard great testimony in the interim, particularly from associations that deal with the elderly and those who have serious medical issues like dementia and Alzheimer's. In 2020, there were an estimated 10,000 people in Wyoming who had dementia. 60% of those were prone to wandering, and 5% of those who wandered were able to find their way home, which means if these individuals are not recovered within the first 24 hours of them going missing, they're often found deceased. So this bill would direct Homeland Security and on page 2 and the Highway Patrol on page 3 to expand their coverage of these missing alert systems. Mr. Chairman, we heard from our agencies that they've been taking steps to implement these programs, but we wanted to make sure they were codified in statute so that if a future governor's administration wanted to pull the plug on these programs, they would have to at least consult with the Wyoming legislature before doing so, and we could weigh in on that determination. Going on to page 4, you'll see conforming language, just again, if the tribes wanted to adopt their own systems, that we would work with them as well. And then finally, on page 5, you'll see this definition of what an adult at risk means for the purposes of this section. And that's anyone, an adult who has a developmental disability, who suffers from Alzheimer's or dementia, or who suffers or could suffer if they didn't receive their medication, cognitive impairment that would render that adult incapable of getting to a familiar location without assistance. So I'm proud to report that, again, there's a lot of effort underway to get these programs up and running, but this would codify it. And best of all, Mr. Chairman, you'll see there is no fiscal note with this. This is something that is supported, again, by senior groups that represent Alzheimer's patients, our Highway Patrol, and other entities, as well as the governor's office. So happy to answer any questions. But before we do that, I would ask that Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 be read in.
Read in the amendment.
House Bill 18, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 4, line 5 after.
Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 18 and would ask you to vote aye. This is just a technical correction of how we refer to our tribes, the Eastern Shoshone Tribe, the Northern Arapaho Tribe, or the Cooperative Tribal Governing Body. There were some extra words in there that need to be deleted. Question on the amendment.
Questions on the amendment? Sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion, Committee of Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 18, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill. Questions on the bill?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 18, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee of the whole beg leave to rise and sit again.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Out of here. It's fun. See you later. Take your glasses.
Motion carried. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we stand recess, now everybody pay attention, till 1:30 PM. 1:30.
Announcements. Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your committee number 7, corporations, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in Capitol Room W110 and online. We'll finish our discussion, and we have an amendment we're going to take up on House Bill 5 engrossed voter registry list, voter ID, and absentee ballots. We will then take up House Bill 86 engrossed disclosure of private cryptographic keys from the Blockchain Task Force. Then we'll take up House Bill 7 underage marriage amendments and House Bill 73 engrossed annexation vote requirement. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs will meet today upon adjournment and Capitol Center in W2 online to consider House Bill 57, Armed Forces Amendments, House Bill 160, Driver's License, Veterans Designation, replacing DD2, Form 214.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agricultural, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet tomorrow after adjournment, 15 minutes after adjournment, to consider the following bills. House Bill 21, State Lands, Use of Land Qualifications Requirements, and House Bill 22, State Land Lease Deficiencies and Cure Process.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources will meet tomorrow at 8 o'clock in W2 and online to hear 3 bills. HB 15, County Authority to Dissolve Museum Boards Clarification, HB 126, Trespass Removal of Trespasser, and HB 147, Unlawful Trespass Signage, Taking of Wildlife.
Thank you. Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet tomorrow, Thursday, February 9th, upon noon recess in Capitol Extension Room W6 and online to take up the following 3 bills. House Bill 100 engrossed, Acquisition Value Study. House Bill 213 engrossed, Energy Production Inventory Exemption. And House Bill 229 engrossed, Electronic Payment of Sales and Use Taxes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further announcements. Heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate will stand recessed till 1:30 p.m.